Welcome. I'm Aaron Jack, and this is the Aaron Jack Show. Today we're going to be on with David Henry Nobody Jr. So I'm really excited to have him on. He's a performance artist. He's a visual artist. He's a sculptor. I just really appreciate you all being here today. So thank you so much. All right. Let's have him on. Let's get him on here with Doing Good HQ. There we go. David Henry Nobody Jr. Welcome.
Hey, how are you, Aaron?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm good. Welcome to the David Nobody bunker deep inside the labyrinth of Brooklyn, New York.
Wow. Wow. What's the most exciting thing that you've got hanging up in your studio that you'd love to show us?
So many things. Well, there's a lot of prints around. That's a really big one. That's called Poker Face. Those are older. Well, what else? I don't know. This is kind of, we're jumping in quick here, but like this, for example, is like the array of stuff that I have here. Because I'm, in character as this guy, David Nobody. And it's a little like complex because it's not a static character. It's a character that keeps shape-shifting. So not only am I in character, but my character is incessantly shape-shifting. So I've got a lot of stuff here.
Would you like to shapeshift for us for a second? If you have something.
We might be able to get to that. I don't know. I thought about it. There's certainly some peanut butter around probably or something like that. Let's see.
Oh my God. I love it. I love it. So tell me about some of these materials that you've connected to, and how do you engage with them or even consider engaging every time in a different way?
I think like I kind of like the thing with me is the ideology of how I work is like usually like the it's diametrically opposed to the way that most people make art. Like I try not to really, I do impose my creative will upon the piece, which is, I build on myself or on models usually. But I also let like the circumstances and the materials kind of impose their will on me more. So I kind of morph the character of David Nobody to like the materials or the iconography, basically. Like if I'm wearing a dollhouse, then I morph myself over with body paint to transform into something that is interacting psychologically in some way with the dollhouse. Like if I'm putting mayonnaise or peanut butter on myself. Yeah, it's pretty like, for lack of a better word, site specific. And I guess I would probably be like going way back in decades, probably influenced by like almost location specific and site specific artistic psychology coming out of the 1990s underground that I was part of in Williamsburg, Brooklyn.
Was there a particular place that you remember going to see like a performance or site-specific piece that really took you and you'd like to share?
There was a lot. I mean, like just like as far as like background, like I went to a kind of like very academic, very conservative art department in a liberal arts college. So I wasn't even in art school like in the early 90s. I was like, like I know people that were like bros that got drunk on the weekends and stuff. And in a way, that was kind of good also because it kind of just, I was kind of influenced by Americana in general because I was kind of like trying to be normal like so badly before I really flung myself into art. And it wasn't working out at all. I was a complete freak. Sorry, there's a cat here yowling. Hey, buddy. I was kind of taught to paint and draw from observation, and that turned out to be really key. I tried to be like a Jackson Pollock painter when I was like 20 and 21, and I thought I was a shit. But the paintings were bad. But when I drew and painted from direct observation, I did something very curious. I would kind of, all the students would try and record what they saw at the University of New Hampshire where I went. But I would actually unconsciously rearrange the space and the compositions and the lighting like crazy. I was sometimes not totally aware I was doing it. And the faculty felt that was like my true artistic voice. And as frustrating as that was for me when I was 21, like I was like really good at what, this seemingly academic method of art making. And I was like looking to break out. There was no internet. I had not that many role models other than Jackson Pollock and people like that I saw in art history books. But it ended up being really key because by the time I started seeing like performance art, say circa like 1993 in New York, and also I met some living performance artists too that ended up being really influential. I kind of realized that like reality itself was a painting and all you had to do was step into it. So that in a way, like my sensibility as an artist lent itself to like an extreme mixing of art and life, like from inception, although I didn't really have the language until I moved here, like on my own without knowing anybody. And I ended up like working on an art trucking job with a pretty well-known performance artist who was like in his 50s at the time, Kim Jones, the Mud Man, which you can look him up. He was really interesting. I think he's still around. He's like pushing probably 75 or 80 now. But Kim was like basically in character like all the time at work on the job. Oh my God, my cat is going crazy. Should we just integrate him?
We should definitely integrate your cat. We should introduce the cat.
That's Honey Boo Boo right there. Aww. Honey Boo Boo.
Aw.
That's my boy. So he likes to climb up the ladder near the photography area. Sorry for the interruption. So here's life interrupting art and art interrupting life. But
well, I mean, that's kind of the way it is like, there's a back and forth, right? Between life and art and art.
For sure, yeah. So, yeah, no, I definitely saw some performances, and I kind of started out like in this like underground performance art scene, like at these weird clubs in Williamsburg. There was like, they had such cool names. It was like La La Landia. There was another club called Brand Name Damages. There was another club called Minor Injury. And there was another one called The Mustard Factory, and that's where I really started. Around 93, 94. And I was trying to break into the gallery scene in Manhattan. I was like taking my slides and applying to things, but not really getting in. Although I got a couple things broke out a little around those years, around by 95. But it was at those events, like I think one thing in like 93, I made like an installation. And by the time the event started, because it was kind of a party, like a 24-hour party, not a rave, totally much goofier than that. Nobody saw my work, but the thing that communicated the most were the performance art pieces. People dressed up in like goofy outfits and all kinds of stuff. And so I kind of set my mind to trying a performance. And I met this guy from England, Dominic McGill, who I collaborated with a lot later. And we did our first performance around then. So it was kind of pretty mind-altering stuff. And I was fortunate that also, too, in that scene, nobody was trying to be famous. Everybody was kind of just doing it for the sake of doing it. And it was like really goofy and really accepting. Like a lot of the art and the performances that people did like were pretty talent-free and had in retrospect and sucked. And even my stuff did, too. But it gave me the opportunity to be really free and really experimental, like really try stuff where almost like in NFT Twitter, where it's like such a hug box, I like also come from a lot of undergrounds that were very warm, where like no matter what you did, people would love you and like get behind your insanity. So lucky in that sense that kept my ideology like very open and capable of growth and a lot of collaboration. I'm not an academic that went to Yale and views art like quite rigidly, which there's nothing wrong with that. I love those guys too, but I just, my the way I make works, kind of starting from the beginning, there is like my whole way of making work and thinking about art is often like the direct opposite of the contemporary art dialogue in so many many ways. But we can get into that.
Is that on purpose that it's kind of juxtaposed in a certain way? Because you're running along different lines between the performance art and the visual art contemporary world. How do you find that that kind of running alongside them or juxtaposing your different views, and you seeing that kind of reflected from the academia or not reflected?
Well, there's no doubt, like, you know, like also in the early times, I was always looking at what was popular in the art world. You know, I remember like seeing like Matthew Barney's stuff. Who else? I was aware, like I looked at the art magazines. I knew what Damien Hirst was doing. I was really into performance artists like Gillian Waring, British performance artist. There was no doubt I was always like kind of balancing what I was doing, even in these underground pieces. Like I kind of knew something of the contemporary scene, but I wasn't really trying to get my work into galleries that badly. I mean, I really wanted to, but the problem always was, and even this goes in more to the in the last, since like I joined Instagram in 2014, I'm very impatient, and I'm not obsessed with the power structure of the art world. You know, I mean, I'm aware of it, and I definitely bounce my work off it, even if I disagree with what I see people doing. I'm a Libra, so I'm very good at seeing other perspectives besides my own simultaneously, almost in a contradictory sense. Yeah, I kind of just like went off on my own, basically, more or less, with again like an infatuation with with a philosophy of extreme mixing of art and life, very extreme. And there were a couple collaborations in the past where it really went like so far off the deep end, I couldn't tell like what was art and what wasn't in terms of day-to-day actions. And also too, like, I mean, in general, I can't tell what's real and what's not in terms of society. For sure. I just feel like we're force-fed so much propaganda. I don't know what's real and what's not. And I don't mean that in a conspiracy sense. I just mean that in terms of intellectual deconstruction. So I make art to kind of make sense of all this stuff, and I integrate art and life and take it off the canvas. Oh, what I was trying to say is because I was always very impatient. I wouldn't wait around for a big gallery to give me a show, like when I was younger, especially. I would just join up with my friends, which I would encourage young people to do too. Join together and just go for it. You try shit, you know, be experimental. Don't be afraid to be an idiot. Everybody's trying to be so authentic and like so careful. I don't know. I mean, I kind of like, I love artists like Jan Eriksson, another the balloon destroyer guy. Is another contemporary of mine on Instagram and also in NFT also too. I mean, I think he's like not afraid to make an idiot out of himself. Stop being so cool, everyone, man. It's like, let's take art to another level. Try stuff. Fall on your face. It's good for you. Builds character.
I love that about just trying stuff. What do you suggest for people to kind of go out there and try, or how to engage further in the world, to take their art and life making practice, as it were, to kind of the next level? Because it seems like you've seen quite some things that might be able to be helpful for us to engage farther.
Well, I think it's easier with the internet, as a matter of fact. You know, I think you just have to like do stuff, record it, and post it. I think if you're not like kind of pushing a creative agenda on the internet, it becomes much more consumerist. You just end up death scrolling. I have a lot of friends that like can't be on social media because all they do is death scroll. But you know, the tools are there to I mean, just look at TikTok. TikTok is mixing art and life. I mean, the internet is the biggest. I talk about life being a canvas. I mean, the internet is really the canvas. And you know, these apps like TikTok and stuff, where you're looking at in the future, everybody will be famous for 15 minutes, right? We're all said that. Well, that's like TikTok. It looks like everyone has their own TV show, basically ongoing. You know, it's pretty tripped out. So I think people are doing it, but it's just like everything that's happening on the internet is not necessarily recognized as art, and maybe it takes some. I mean, I've built a degree of authority, although I hate that word. In taking all this trash off the internet and wearing it on myself and stuff. I mean, if you are familiar with the history of art, you know that everything that I do is subtly quite referential to the history of art and history of performance art. So like I kind of curate my moves in accordance with my understanding of the flow of art for like the last 1,000 years. But I think like TikTok already is performance art, you know. Just depends if, you know, I just think that those people should insist that they're artists. Put me in the Whitney Biennial, God damn it. Do it.
No, I'm very curious about this like tie between the internet and the creation of art, because your work has, I guess, become very based around this connection with the internet and people.
Yeah.
And how do you see this? How do you see your connection with others through the screen?
Well, that's complicated. I mean, I just like kind of to, you know, I often bring this up, but I think the key text about like sort of mediated self and mediated reality is the Marxist deconstruction from the 60s. Society of the Spectacle, Guy Debord. Just even if you just read the summary on Wikipedia, you'll understand that in 1967 he understood that like we were already like Black Mirror, or becoming Black Mirror, you know, which I was actually just rewatching a few of those the other night. Sorry, wait, repeat the question. What were you asking?
I think there's this tie between like the self and the internet and the people on the other side, and also like the characters that we become for the internet, you know, these identities and the nom de plumes and all of this. So I'm very curious about like, you know, the way that you see those different characters interacting.
Sure. Well, definitely like around like 2016, if you look at interviews from that time when I was on the BBC and Vice and other stuff, the first thing I noticed, and at a time when that was pretty new, is that like we were all inhabiting digital masks, basically. And the public was like being given like these tools to manipulate themselves and their identities. And now that is in turn like projected deeply into life itself. It's rearranged everything in I think, along with the pandemic, has also rearranged everything a lot. I mean, I think that those are now like, you know, that's 6 years ago. These things are more taken for granted, and you're also seeing like the ramifications of it. It's not all like a happy world, basically. It's also quite dark too. It produces a lot of mental illness in young people, and corporations are exploiting, you know, us for that. Of course, that's Web 2. You know, Web 3 is the promise that you will be able to be sovereign and more self-empowered financially from the splashes that you make on the internet, basically. But that's a whole nother discussion. Well, I mean, it's complicated, but going back to the Guy Debord stuff, Society of the Spectacle, it really says that that you're sort of not really an authentic, natural self anymore. That the photographs of you hugging somebody are more important than actually hugging somebody. And then he didn't really understand that there would be like a social media apparatus that would like co-join like everybody's actions simultaneously in terms of a mathematical algorithm, because our lives are really like dictated by mathematics increasingly, I think. And AI is sort of the next level of that, which you're seeing in NFT. But I'm not saying it's all bad. I think it's fascinating. And again, like my position is to, I created the character David Nobody to explore this language. And I, from the beginning, when I began to use myself, if you look back to 2014 and 2015, I started to like use myself in my work around that time. And, you know, I got more likes. And I was like, oh, I see. It's the internet is performance art. You know, it's, you know, it's kind of tapped into, you know, decades of language that I had behind me at the time. And the character David Nobody is my take on the digital mask kaleidoscope that we inhabit, basically. So, you know, I tend to liken the work to wearing the dilemmas, basically. I mean, my theory is I'm not sure if we actually really see each other. Like when you look, I mean, I see you, but I think we're also projecting into each other a lot more than we think. My theory with David Nobody, which is a more exaggerated than normal character, almost like an inside out person, like sort of wears his problems on his sleeves openly, is that you don't see nobody, which means not having a body, but you actually see yourself. So that you project yourself so deeply into the character, and that's either like quite pleasing or quite revolting, one of the two. So my work deals with like the ecstatic drug-like pleasure of it, of this type of psychic projection, to like the nightmare of it also too, that I think that we're kind of all still grappling with in a way.
I think that's really interesting, this like psychic projection through the internet and how we each kind of deal with that as our own character, but then also as like you've created your own character that deals with it in his own way. And there are elements of people also creating their own identities within that, you know, especially in this anonymous and Web3 kind of world. How do you see that kind of moving forward in that sovereignty that you spoke about, or like the promise of it?
I'm not really sure how it's going to play out, but I think like some of the smartest people I've talked to, because I'm always like trying to chat like with people like you, people who are smart and give me ideas, and then I sort of chew on them and enhance them. But someone kind of said basically like that where the public is being kind of primed basically to go all out AR, and that you want to see Web3 and the internet and reality has increasingly turned into a toy where, you know, the programs that the animators have right now that are kind of harder to learn and harder to get, well, in the future it'll be a lot easier for everybody to use them. So I think you're dealing with even more drastic distortions in like reality as we know it. As the whole thing turns into a big animated toy, basically. Um, and it's up to the artist to show everybody like we essentially gentrify this stuff, you know, in a sense. Like we show people how to be creative with it, although they also know too. Um, yeah. So I mean, I think regarding the sovereignty of it, I mean, I think those ethical lines are also defined by artists also too, or influenced by artists, but also that there's a public consensus in the mass use of all these apps and social media apps and all the creative tools that are opening up more and more on in Web3 and through NFT. There's a public consensus and public movements that are stronger than anything I could do. You know, I'm just part of it basically. I reflect it.
I think that's really interesting what you're saying about reflecting and being a part of it, in this mass kind of movement, and it being a performance art. And maybe people are not necessarily aware of themselves being in the performance art of it all
Yeah.
itself.
That's
what
that's the beauty of it. I think one of the problems with contemporary art is that it's too self-conscious, and that's like an age-old dilemma, like in art. I'm influenced by movements from the '60s that said art is a framework for life, or art is a framework for life to flow into the work. Um, and that is a way to kind of to beat the self-consciousness of like, you know, when you're a painter, it's so self-conscious. I think it's like kind of hard to let go and become more than yourself in a way. Like to channel life into the work is tricky. Um, that's the beauty of the internet, is that it's like so not self-conscious of that type of premise. Maybe when you call yourself an artist, it's pretentious and it kind of shuts down a lot of avenues. You know, I've tried to become more than like an artist. I think, you know, I mean, like my work is like not my practice or like my work, it's my life. Like everything that I do is real. I wear it, you know, I live it all the way. And even more so, like although the work is very internet specific right now, and the past pieces like where I went out undercover as this rich guy for a year, Alex von Furstenberg in 2000, and I met the Clintons and stuff, where I stalked Donald Trump in 1998 and 99, and I also predicted the Trump presidency. I went around with a Trump for President 2000 poster, posing as a conservative white guy douchebag. And there's videos of that I haven't totally released. Those pieces are even more like going way off the canvas of art, way off, and becoming less self-conscious by like kind of immersing myself in the public. I mean, I would say someone, by the way, who's really awesome with a political performance art is Crackhead Barney. She's amazing. I don't know if you know her at all.
why don't you share? Why don't you share about her, since you know there's a lot of people watching now and whenever now is. So,
Okay. Oh well, Crackhead Barney is she's like super funny, and but she's also pretty serious. She's pretty obnoxious, and she kind of goes out in character as this crazy performance artist. And I think the stuff blew up like really big, like in like around January 6th. She was there, and she like interviewed the right wing crazy shaman guy. But she's also really obnoxious. So she kind of goes out and razzes the right wing people. But she also gives the leftists a hard time too. I think that it's much more political, like much smarter performance art, way off the canvas of the galleries and the museums, way off, and much more internet. That's someone who's doing it really successfully. I mean, if you scroll back on Crackhead Barney and Friends, and I've collaborated with her, and also another internet Instagram performance artist I like a lot and have worked with is Matthew Silver, who's really special, very touched person.
I've met him in person. I love him.
Oh, cool.
He's an amazing guy.
You're based in Europe, right?
I am now, but I was based in the U.S. So.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, Matthew also is another person who's like way off the canvas. These are all like kind of creative solutions to like kind of take on life. I think there's a lot of art is like, and including an NFT too. And don't get me wrong, I love it. It's very insular, and I'm gonna have to use the E word, which is not very polite, but escapist also too. And I think that for some of us that's not enough. I think the internal reflection is really important, and I really look to even academic art for the structure of how to look within. But I think that art must confront and take on society, in some way. Yeah. And I admire Crackhead Barney and Matthew Silver for that. And they're not, I don't think they went to art school. They're pretty self-taught, basically.
I'm very curious about this looking within aspect and how you kind of view that in this kind of internal, external framework of like, removing the self from the character and then putting the self back in the character, and then this intermixing of life with the character as, I think this is a very interesting thing that I feel like many of us are going through in the internet, but haven't maybe quite explored those identities fully, and that integration. And I'm very curious about how you view that kind of creation of the self and then looking within, and what that relationship is.
Mm, I'm not sure. Complicated. I mean, I certainly look within as when I create a piece, like basically I start to arrange things on myself. Um, I mean, I've often said for me, I mean, my position is unusual, is that maybe I had a Buddhist boss on a job for years who was also an ex-Marine, and he kind of was pretty hard on me. Like he told me that my personality was too scattered and I needed to eat more root vegetables to be more compressed. Um, but I think like something to the effect of like the only way to find yourself is to let go of yourself. Um, and in my work, like I've really tried to like supersede my singular identity and become other things. So in those, people like the David Nobody performances because I truly, in the most poignant of them, and they're experimental. It's not like my Instagram is not a museum retrospective. It's like I'm putting stuff up as I make it and trying things. And I sometimes I can't tell whether how well it's going to work or if it's going to be great. I mean, I can kind of tell, but not always. The viewers are the consensus ultimately on the meaning of the work. But I mean, I try to, they're very introspective. For me, that's how I reach that state of introspectiveness. In the past, I've had other methodologies. Before the internet, it was the dance floor. I loved, like, in the later 90s and beyond, like drum and bass and techno and all that stuff. And I've never been a big drinker, but I've always, less so, but I used to love to get stoned as shit and hit the dance floor with my weird friends that became also my another art movement in the 2000s, the Fantastic Nobodies. But it was really the dance floor that was like the most introspective experience for me, that it was kind of, I would go into a trance. I would dance like so hard for like 6 hours with like very few breaks, get really, really stoned and like really get down to the beats. I was always the kid like right in front of the subwoofer. Like now my hearing is like probably damaged because like me and my friends were like right up front usually. So that was one way, but I think the characters is another. I think that, with everything being like so simulated, like you have to, like people have to find their spirituality in it somehow. It's not like society has always been fucked up, I think. There's different problems for different generations. And hopefully I can provide, some inspiration on some approaches, or at the very least, I'm just basically trying to document like how I felt during this time for even if it's not fully or only partially understood right now, like in the future, maybe it'll be an interesting time capsule. Like you'll look at like it's funny when I like my younger friends like look at like tell me about the 1990s or the 2000s. I'm like, dude, none of us underground people looked at any of that shit. We weren't listening to like Rage Against the Machine and stuff. No, there's all so in my work, I just want to kind of try and document like my take on what I'm living through for now, and to be disseminated now. Like I said, the audience is really kind of takes command of the meaning of the work. Basically, I let the audience complete the idea more or less in the work. But I want, I'm sort of trying to leave these time capsules that maybe they'll stand out and as an alternative narrative for the future, that like this is what it felt like to live inside what we're living in.
I think that's really interesting between the audience perspective and the meaning given to the work, and then how we're looking back at the work. Looking back at our own work, how we're looking back at that, and I think that's really interesting, especially in terms of like blockchain and how, you know, these NFTs are going to stay there and kind of like this time capsuleness and the meanings that get passed on through like just viewing and then ownership. Do you think that there's something that's going to be changing in terms of how people view these identities, view these time capsules when there's this like changing digital ownership of like the performance of something that's so ephemeral,
Mm.
perhaps in nature?
Maybe it'll have more influence and be a little bit more organized. I think it's great. You know, I don't really, I can't say how that's going to play out. Not sure, but I think it's a good thing. I mean, personally, like in NFT, like I had an amazing year if I could sort of segue into that, like 2021 was unbelievable. I think my first mints were in around mid-March on Foundation, and I sold my first two pieces like way fast. I was really nervous, like I had no idea. And it actually turned out that a major contemporary artist, James Jean, bought my first two NFTs like back to back, and it kind of took off from there. But I think the provenance of the pieces like is really powerful. Like fast forwarding to like January of this year, before the market was really crashed a lot, I think, for fine art NFTs. I'm kind of like rebuilding after a lull for sure. But I minted up like the best of my performance art photography from 2015 to 2020 called Nobody Pegs on OpenSea. I used a manifold contract for the first time, which was great. But sold some so far, more pending. It's a lot. It's 75 pieces. But the provenance is really wonderful, because in the description I say like when it was published, and a link to my Instagram of like, say if it was published in 2015 is a link in the description. That provenance is really powerful to me, because I know what's happened with my work is that it's gone on and influenced many other younger artists. There's a lot more people putting food on themselves now. And I'm down with that, you know, awesome. Let's make a wave. But I also want to stake the fact, you know, I want to stake my provenance in it. And now it's staked on a blockchain, basically. So in a way, it gives me the credit, basically, and the potential for compensation, which is very helpful and I'm thankful for and amazing. But it also sets the work free for interpretation. That's like everything I ever wanted was like revolution, and also like, yo, I want to get paid, you know? So there you go. I mean, that's an example. And as far as how that plays out in the future, I would recommend that you guys collect some of them so that, you know, you get in on the game early, baby. I've seen some people blow up like crazy. I mean, I knew Justin Aversano before he became who he is. He's the highest selling NFT photographer. He's a cool guy, but we were involved in a gallery thing in like 2018, and I mean, he was making his work and struggling like anybody. But now I just read that the floor on at least on one of his pieces is 300 ETH. It's just unbelievable. So if you do 300 ETH times 100 pieces in the set, that's a lot of money. So that's crazy, and that's like the top cat basically that did it. You know, very proud of him. Amazing. There's a lot of pitfalls in art. It's hard. I mean, I think Justin is a success story, but I also, a lot of my comrades have fallen hard. You know, I mean, they've perished, passed away. The drugs, alcohol, mental illness also too, you know, will take people. Depression, they give up. It takes like tremendous, and in Kenny Schechter's interview I saw with you, he also has been around for like, you know, 30 odd years like me. And it takes tremendous perseverance. I don't know. I'm not sure if people understand like how much I was shit on when I was young, basically as an artist, and that I was really excluded from the galleries and stuff. I mean, like embraced at times, but often also mocked also too. And the first with Instagram, I was able to go around the gatekeepers and build up my work. um, over the last like 6 years. And then with NFT, I'm able basically to sell like these effects. I mean, I sold prints in the past and I was paid for performances, and but I think like the selling of these ephemeral recordings um, is just really next level, and it's I'm just blown away that the future is like arcing like so elegantly into my work. And I also keep predicting the future, like sort of, for example, the Nobody Pegs performance collection on OpenSea, like a lot of NFT people look at it and they're like, you predicted PFP. It's kind of like a character with like different attributes, like an array of different attributes, but it's like kind of manually done and probably more creative too. But I don't know, I keep foreseeing stuff. Kind of, I guess that's because that's when you obsess on something weird that no one else is really that interested in, maybe you'll come up with those ideas.
So what are you obsessing about now?
Oh, well, going forward, I have a solo show coming up in June, opening June 10th. I don't know if Nicole has announced this officially, but I can say that I believe that I'll be showing with NFT artist Nicole Ruggiero. Nicole, I'm sorry if you're not announcing it, but now you're announced. She'll be in the front room at 11 Newell Street Gallery. I did a solo show there last December, and that was my first actually all NFT show. It was all video projections, and I made a collection on Foundation, sold 5 of 9, which was amazing. These videos, I made that show in 2 weeks flat. I've never done that before. Now this one in June is like, well, there's more time involved, and I'm also going to make an immersive installation. So that's coming up, and that'll be open during NFT NYC. If you're coming to New York, hope you come say hello, because we'll also have like another opening during NFT NYC. I think that's like around later in June, right? So that's coming up. I have a drop with Institute, who I was in NFTism, the Kenny Schechter curated show, although it was the gallery that put me in and not Kenny. By the way, I showed with Kenny in the 1990s. Yeah, I was in I did a few performances and stuff, but I think that we had really different interests. You know, again, like I think he was kind of pretty focused on the art world, and I was like focused on society and reality itself or something, or just we went off on. So I showed with him. I actually have some really funny footage of me performing in one of his shows, and also being interviewed when I was like 27. I think I hired a camera guy to come in. I always did like as best as possible to like record like everything I did and keep the recordings. So let's see, looping back, show at 11 Newell Street Gallery, and the director is my dear friend Coco Dahl, who's the director of the gallery, and they show physical art and NFT art also. Nicole is an NFT artist. She'll be in the front room. I'll be in the back room, and I'm doing like a pretty major exhibition called Upside Down World. Like it'll be like a lot more ambitious than the one. It's not a bang it out in 2 week type show, and that was a lot of fun. You know, I no regrets on that. But I think this would be. I'm looking for a deeper gaze in the work. I think this time. I was invited to send work or transmit a performance over the internet to a museum in Austria also in June. And that's it's kind of through Annika Meyer, who I'm friendly with, NFT curator, if she's amazing. So there's like a lot going on. I'm actually like just finishing up a lull. I had COVID like 2 weeks ago. Remember we were supposed to chat, and I'm glad I didn't do it. I was like really dragging ass, but I'm better now, and I hit the sauna like once or twice, which is always a big thing for me. I like heat. So sweating it out and getting ready for like quite a major production coming up. I think like I'm like the key to understanding like my work is that I'm like immensely competitive with myself. Like I want to outdo myself basically. I'm trying to. I like the challenge.
Wow. So you've got a lot coming up, and I'm wondering in terms of this deeper gaze into the work, how do you view that as now you're kind of looking back at a 30-year career moving forward.
Mm.
And what does that mean in terms of building that, to build these like quicker shows and have this, certain energy, and then build that deeper gaze? And how does that play out for you between like these different fine art worlds, NFT worlds,
Mm.
Twitter, and all of these different fine art worlds? How does this play out for you and these different identities that you've partially assumed to some degree?
Sure. Well, I'm like a person that wears like many hats. I kind of do everything myself. I hire some people. I actually hired people to help me with that show in December. I mean, I couldn't make a solo show in 2 weeks without hiring people. Um, in terms of how it plays out, I don't really know. I want to have a retrospective. That's what I really want. And I'm kind of really, I guess if there's young artists out there, I want to say also too, like, there's also Avatar to perform, like Sibel, who's a Brazilian. I Sibel does many different things, and I also identify with that. That I also am a very multi-dimensional artist. The reason why, like, the art world gave me a hard time in the past is that I did a massive aesthetic about faces from body of work to body of work. Like, I was like, fuck you. I don't want to. Deschamps said, I don't like to repeat myself. I was like, word up, homie. I understand that. Fuck that shit. So I didn't repeat myself. I really did I would really drastically reform my whole life and change like my look, probably how I acted, all that for the work basically. So my end game or I'm not sure where it will go, but I would like to have a retrospective where a lot of these different bodies of work would be considered in the same space. There's no doubt that like the internet allows for people to be more aesthetically multidimensional creators. It's more possible to do different things and have them all together as one. Like I said, Sibel is amazing that they like are experimenting with AI and GAN, and then in the next moment it's more like performance stuff using themselves, and that's rad. I mean, I hope that I broke new ground with great difficulty in that area, and that it becomes easier for people not to be like one-trick ponies. And there's nothing against that. Honestly, I have friends that like have been making similar paintings for like 20, 25 years, and for them, it's a whole world, you know? I'm not dissing that. It's just not right for me, basically. So I'm hoping going forward that like a space has the cojones to step up and offer me a retrospective, because I think it's going to look like 100-car pileup on the highway, I hope. I'm just beginning, basically. I'm just beginning to get more and more green lights to like really do what I want. Like I love 11 Newell Street Gallery because they kind of just hand me the keys and say, go for it. And, everybody knows that's really difficult. In New York, it's like fucking impossible to do a show like that. So I'm very fortunate that I was able to meet this gallery, and that I could detonate something of a deeper gaze, as you say. But you were asking about deeper gaze. I just think you'll know it when you see it, that you can see that it'll be more considered than a show done quickly. I love a show done quick, and I would do it again. It's like that show took me back to the beginning of Instagram, when I don't really post every single day. And I think that's another thing about the internet too, is that you have to pace yourself. If you look at the older content creators like out of YouTube, they all burned out and became depressed, and they were all overexposed. And I think the same thing can happen, and it happens on Instagram, and it can happen in NFT too. You have to understand like your capacity and like what you can handle, and like you have to keep that there is an element of mental illness to all of this, And like as much as I wear it, I also have to distance myself, and like I'll come like and do an interview like not dressed with peanut butter all over myself, because I also need to counterbalance it too,
I love what you're saying about counterbalancing it. And, what your views are on mental illness within all of this, and how can artists out there balance these aspects. I know I struggle with this, and I know many others struggle with this, but I'd love to hear your take on kind of what this is in this digital age with like overworking, oversaturated, over viewing.
Well, I mean, like everything, in it's very consumerist, and one of the problems with that is like in its inherent structure. By the way, and it goes back, like I think, to Marcel Duchamp's 3 standard stoppages, which is about measuring. A standard stoppage is like an absolute inch, absolute foot. It's this thing that you use as a standard to measure things by, but you can extrapolate that idea, and I think that he was sort of talking about that in a industrialized and simulated society, simulated reality, is that the standards of self-worth would be completely fucking made up, and could be like it's something to watch out for. So the ramifications of that are essentially mathematized and into a social array, and I think everybody compares themselves to unrealistic standards. I mean, that's been well known. You can look at the Black Mirror episodes and see that. We just watched the one that I hadn't seen before, of the woman with the app rating system for everything, where she's trying to be a 4.4, and then in the end, like, it all falls apart, and she's like, "Fuck everyone! I can curse if I want to." And da, 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 da. Yeah, I mean, I think we're increasingly comparing ourselves like to machines, and we're not. Very unrealistic standards. How would that be regulated? I have no idea. I think like Facebook and Instagram has been really irresponsible with the exploitation of young people regarding that. How would you codify that in a more healthy way? I'm not sure. I think make more art and ask more questions, Don't believe the hype. But it's hard when you're young and you grew up with it. I don't know. Everybody, there's a lot of different methodologies around. Like my girlfriend was showing me about like people with multiple personality disorder who are like ultra woke, they call themselves alters, and they say they have like all these different characters they dress up with, but it's a way to cope with the mental illness of being like splintered. It's like alters, and they refer to themselves, I think they use the pronoun that I'm a system. And I was like, wow, that is fucking far out, man. There it is, So it doesn't take just art to kind of deal with it, but I feel like everybody's dealing with it in a way. I don't know. You're just like, the way I do it is the way that I do it. I hope that, I know that my work has inspired like lots of other people to put food and stuff on themselves. And maybe if more people did that, like, we would have a more honest and less destructive world, less war, more food on your face. Why not?
Wow, that's a beautiful point, that as we wrap up, to just consider a little less war, a little bit more food on the face. I think that's a hell of a point, and how we deal with mental illness in such a time, and the oversaturation. First of all, I want to say thank you for joining.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you.
Really appreciate your time and being here and getting over COVID and still doing it. I'm a big fan. I've been watching you for a long time, and just really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, nice talking with you. Hopefully I kept it in the guidelines. Like I was saying before the talk, like I've done so many different things. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to keep the conversation focused. My Buddhist friend is right, like more vegetables and less all over the place. But I'm trying. Hopefully it made sense. But I think that if people aren't familiar with my work, they can look like on my Instagram, and I also have a website, like in the link tree. There's like links to all the NFTs and collectible pieces, but there's also like a link to a website that more formally shows like my history of stalking Donald Trump and posing as Alex von Furstenberg, rolling out red carpets in the 1990s, and no one is showing up, and hundreds of people are waiting for nothing to happen. you can see like where I come from more and what the basis and evolution is for the work. And I hope that it's like inspiring for both artists and non-artists going forward.
Wow, I love that. I love that piece of inspiration. Where can people find it? Can you share with us all the handles so that we know?
Oh,
Because we might watch later without the typing and all of that. So just tell us
uh,
it.
my Twitter is David Henry Nobo 1. My website is davidhenrybrownjr.com, which is my real name. Nobody is a nom de plume, meaning not having a body. And then the rest are like on David Henry Nobody Jr. my Instagram. In the link tree, there's like links to every single kind of goodie that's out there about me. There's a lot of interviews out in the metaverse from the past that are Googleable and also linked on my website. There's 2 documentary shorts. There's one by Keith, my friend who I met, Keith Aronowitz, did a 14-minute piece called David Henry Nobody Jr. in 2019. It's great. It's amazing to have someone document that much of your work process. I wish I had that in the years past. And then Arte Tracks, which is in France and Germany, did like an 8-minute documentary short of my piece a couple years ago. That's also, I have that like on my website. I think those are very insightful pieces that show like how I make what I make and what I'm getting into a little bit more.
Wow, that's amazing. And I've watched some of these, and I highly suggest everybody out there go and find them and watch them, view the new ones, because there will be new ones out, I'm sure.
Sure.
Yeah. So before we leave, do you want to leave us with some last words, some different ideas to sit with, to just sit with in the rest of our day or week?
Oh, I'm not sure I have anything else to add, but we already have a lot of ingredients in the primordial soup we just made right here, the digital soup. So hopefully some people, a few, will scroll through it, and they could send me a DM if they have any questions. As long as the answers aren't super long, I'll try and and I try and answer all that stuff if someone has a legit question, basically. So I'm accessible.
Wow, thank you so much. It's up to you to press the X, and I just want to say thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, that was great, Aaron. Thank you. I feel a lot more awake now than when we first started, but that was a nice way to start the day. And thanks for flying with Nobody Airlines. Ciao.
Ciao. Thank you so much for joining. This has been Nobody Airlines, here with your pilot, Aaron Jack, on the Aaron Jack Show, with Doing Good HQ, the platform of the day, the NFT platform of the day, where you can mint with up to 199 other people, because 200 altogether, with a nonprofit or a charity getting 5% or more of every single NFT. So thank you so much for joining here on Nobody Airlines. We have gone on such an amazing journey, covering everything from mental illness to inner consciousness and identity, viewing the space between here and then, on a 30-year journey, on a many-year journey for many of us who are viewing, and exploring these connections between performance art and the fine art world, exploring where we were and where we are with NFTs and Web3 in sovereignty. The internet being a way to explore these different aspects that were not here in the past. And I just find that interesting. And I'm so glad for all of you joining here on Nobody Airlines. I'm Aaron Jack with Aaron Jack Show. Thank you to David Henry Nobody Jr., and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.